Welcome back to Home Cooking Hacks, where we do great things in the kitchen without a lot of gizmos and gadgets. So today we're going to be talking about how to make chocolate chip cookies. Now, obviously, you know I don't eat a ton of junk food, but if I'm going to eat some junk food, and I always love junk food, if I'm going to eat some junk food, I'm going to go ahead and have some good stuff rather than some bad processed food stuff with a lot of hydrogenated oils and whatnot in it. So we're going to talk about how to make some chocolate chip cookies today. But before we do, you know, chocolate chip cookies does not have to be just chocolate chips in there. In fact, that's kind of my least favorite way of doing chocolate chip cookies. The best I've ever had is if you use like Reese's Pieces Minis. Those are good. You can, of course, do butterscotch chips. There's, you know, with nuts, without nuts. Basically, we're going to produce the dough that you would use for chocolate chip cookies, and then you just add whatever extra items you want. In my case, I'm going to add my homemade chocolate chips, which I make with coconut oil, and I make those guys with coconut oil, cocoa powder, sugar, and a little bit of vanilla. So I'm going to use those. They're not the best alternative for the chocolate chip cookies, but it's certainly better than a lot of the other options that I have. So I have my recipe as a slightly modified version that I snagged from another place. What I did with mine is I removed all of the processed oils. I found a lot of recipes that were from an era where people are, using a lot of processed oils and vegetable oils that really are not good for you. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to substitute some oils for extra butter, because regular real butter is just the best thing. So this recipe for chocolate chip cookies is going to contain 1 cup of butter. That is a lot of butter, yes, but it's so good. We're going to do 1 cup of butter. We are going to do 2.5 cups of flour, 1 cup of brown sugar, half a cup of regular sugar, and that's why these cookies are not very good. There's a lot of sugar in there. We're going to use 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, half a teaspoon of baking soda, not baking powder, baking soda. And then, of course, if you want to add, whatever chips, whatever nuts, etc. So any cookie recipe, you want to kind of start by mixing all the ingredients except half of the flour. Most of them are always going to have you start with your oil bases first. Now, what I do, so I don't have to fight with my butter at all, is what I like to do is I'm going to leave my butter out either overnight or, since it's a hot summer day right now, just on the counter for a couple of hours, and then I will go ahead and start. So let me go ahead and switch the camera view over, and then we'll be set to go. All right, so here's my mixing bowl I am using, and what we're going to do here is I'm just going to do 2 sticks of butter. Will give you the equivalent of 1 cup. And so I've let these guys sit out on the counter for, I don't know, they've been sitting out for maybe 3 hours or so. So they are very soft, very, very soft. Okay. And usually what you're going to do with your recipe is you're going to start by blending these together. I'm actually just going to do this, just kind of mix it together just a little bit. The reason is this blender, lowest speed is way too high. Usually that's what you want to do, just whip these together. That's sufficient enough. Now our recipe calls now for 1.5 cups, and so you generally want to start with 1/4 or 1/2 of your total flour allotment. So I'm just going to do 1 1/4 cup flour to start. So I just have a 1 cup over here. So there's 1 cup of flour. And then I also have a 1/4 cup over here. I'm just going to use that amount twice. So we're going to start with 1 1/4 cups of our flour. And then we're going to do our brown sugar. I use dark brown sugar rather than light brown sugar. It doesn't really matter which one you want to use. So here, brand new package, got to get it opened up. And many of your recipes are going to call for a cup of packed. So what that means is that you are putting in a lot of your brown sugar, and then you're making sure that it is packed down, so brown sugar will pack. And so you can see that you can pack it down tightly like this. So that's what it means by a cup of packed brown sugar. Just going to go ahead and add a little bit more there, if it's okay if we jump in just a tad bit more, as long as it's not a ton more. That's about a cup of packed brown sugar, so we're going to go ahead and use that. Then we want a half cup of regular sugar. I'm going to shake my sugar up because it is humid here on the East Coast, and my sugar will clump if I don't shake it up. So there's a half a cup of regular sugar. Now we are going to do 2 eggs. I get my eggs also from a local farmer, so these are not your regular store-bought eggs. And now I want 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Not sure where my teaspoon went. Let me go ahead and do the baking powder, which is or baking soda. Half a teaspoon of baking soda. I'm going to use 2 quarter teaspoons for my half a teaspoon. See if I can find a teaspoon. There we go, there's a teaspoon of vanilla. I think this one is just about out, so I'm not sure I'm going to get a full teaspoon. Nope. So I got a new one over here that I just opened up. It probably still has my white tab on it. I got to pull my white tab off. Okay. There's my teaspoon of vanilla. So we have our butter, we have half our flour, brown sugar, regular sugar, eggs, vanilla, and our baking soda. So now we are set to go. So now we're just going to blend this together. Because my blender is so high speed, I usually just poke and prod at it first like this before I turn it on. Otherwise, I'm going to get flour and other ingredients just going everywhere. If you have an appropriate blender that's not crazy, you probably don't have to do this part. Here we go. So you are going to want to blend it until it is very consistent. Might take a minute or so. I went a little too high and got stuff everywhere. That's the problem with this blender. This blender sucks, or mixer, whatever it is. Thing sucks. Don't get that one. I think it's a Walmart Mainstays one. All right, so now that that is thoroughly mixed, we are going to mix in the rest of our flour, which is another 1.25 cups of flour. Get that around off of the edges up top there. There we are. Okay, now our next step here, let me go ahead and give this a quick test, make sure that's good. Cook's taste test. It's wonderful. All right, so now I have my homemade chocolate chips. I have another recipe on how to do these homemade chocolate chips. I'm going to break these apart as much as I can. Doesn't matter, Blender's going to do a real good job of breaking these apart. Okay, so now we're just going to blend a little bit more. I probably should have made more of the chocolate chips than I did here, but That's okay. I'll probably end up eating more of the dough without cooking it. I like chocolate chip cookie dough better than I like chocolate chip cookies. Okay, so now what I actually do is rather than baking everything up as cookies all at once, what I'll actually do is I will do the same thing that you do if you work in a restaurant industry, where you can make the cookies kind of to order. So what I'm going to do is I'll put them out on cookie sheets, flatten them out as little cookie pucks, freeze those, and then I'll come back in later and I'm going to put those inside of a basic storage container, probably just still plastic storage containers here, and then put those in the freezer. And then anytime I want fresh baked cookies, I just take out 2 or 3 of them, put them in a toaster oven for 10 minutes, and I have fresh baked cookies anytime, so I don't have to bake all these cookies now. Okay, as we start to put the cookies back into the mix here, what we're going to do is I'm going to take a cookie sheet and just line the cookie sheet with some wax paper. We are going to repurpose this wax paper later when we go to wrap these cookies. We want them between layers of wax paper. I'm actually just going to use the exact same wax paper. I'm just going to cut it into little pieces when I go to do that later. So what you want here is a little bit more than a tablespoon. What I find works best is if you happen to be using 2 different spoons here. So I'm just going to 2 basic bigger tablespoons. And then what we want to do is we want to get about this much per group. And then just kind of do that. So the reason I want 2 spoons is I'll be able to much easier manipulate with 2 spoons than I will with 1. We're not cooking these yet. Now, if you do need, of course, a lot of cookies, you can actually cook these without being on the wax paper. In fact, you don't want to cook them on the wax paper. But what we're doing here is I'm freezing the cookies. So I can actually put more on here than I would. I'd only do 12 cookies on this sheet if I were baking them. I can probably put 13, 14, 15 or 20 on here because all I'm doing is freezing these. So as I freeze them, I just freeze them down into little chunks, basically little hockey pucks, and then I take these hockey pucks out and pop them right into the toaster oven, and then it just makes these absolutely wonderful, fresh, home-baked cookies every single time. Again, if you are baking these, you just want to do no more than 12 on each cookie sheet. We are not baking these, so I can do many more. Looks like I'll end up with 15 based on my sizing here. Some are a little bigger, some are a little smaller. That's cool. Sometimes you want a bigger cookie. Harder day, bigger cookie. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm gonna, if I can, just kind of bash them down a little bit together. I don't want them to be super duper high. All right, that's pretty good for that sheet. We're just gonna repeat that. Now these guys here again, these are guys gonna go right in the freezer. Our chocolate chip cookies have been in the freezer here for a little bit. So basically now they just look like these. Basically they're just pretty hard dough balls here. So what I'm actually going to do is just start by taking them off of the wax paper and putting them inside of just any type of Tupperware container. Don't worry if they touch each other. They won't. They might stick a little bit if they're too soft, but they won't stick much. So I'm just going to pop those in the freezer and save those for later. So I have a few different containers here because I know I always need a few anytime I'm doing this. And then of course these guys here, whether they're frozen or not, just pop them into an oven for about a good 5 to 10 minutes at about 325. Like I said, I usually just use a toaster oven. That works great for me. And then you will have some chocolate chip cookies. So we'll go ahead and I think I'm going to go ahead and bake a few of these up so that you can see those when they are done. I'll have a couple of these here soon, and then I'm going to go ahead and save the rest of them in a Tupperware container for the next couple of days. So there is chocolate chip cookies, homemade from scratch with homemade chocolate chips in there as well. You can see that the chocolate chips, they do kind of melt apart a little bit, but it's actually pretty good. So thanks for watching Home Cooking Hacks, and if you'd like to check out the website homeCookingHacks.com, then you can go over there, see how you can support us, and find some recipes to download, things like that. So thanks for watching.